This is the Absolute Business Mindset podcast, created and hosted by Mark Hayward. This podcast will interview entrepreneurs, business owners, and people in their careers. We will delve into their journey to success, key life milestones, and go deep into their area of expertise. Get ready to learn from others' successes and failures. Today, we have Solvej Biddle, who is an award-winning entrepreneur, business consultant, inspirational leadership expert, lawyer, and public speaker. Solvej, thank you very much for joining me today.
Oh, it's absolutely fine, Mark. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. So let's dive straight into it. I always start with people's education just to get a grounding, because I find it interesting to see how people move from their education into their career/business. Yeah. So you initially did an economics degree at University of London.
Yes,
so was it very business focused?
Actually, it was more theoretical now that I think about it. I think we did look at, you sort of start with the kind of microeconomics and then the macroeconomics. Yeah. I'd always been very interested in sort of global economies and emerging markets and all that sort of stuff, and also how environmental issues could be solved using economic theory. So that's what I wrote my dissertation on. Hadn't thought about that for quite a while. So it was fairly theoretical, but I suppose that grounding of economics and how things work and how money moves around. How money moves around was a great sort of foundation for other things that I ended up doing. And actually I did economics as an A level and I really liked it. So it was a very sort of natural progression to do that as a degree.
Well, that's very interesting. And then you went to College of Law. So
yes, so I went to law school after that.
So how come? Why?
Well, again, interesting one, because while I was at university, I had actually done some work for the World Wildlife Fund in Madagascar, and I was working on a herpetology project looking for new species of snakes and geckos and all that kind of stuff. And I'd actually been sponsored by Rio Tinto Zinc, and I was very much heading down the road in my mind of being an economist or similar. And just in that last year of university, I thought about where I thought my skills would be best used. And I've always liked to be able to help others solve problems. And I think that law came up as an idea and as an opportunity. And so I applied to the College of Law and managed to get a place there at Guildford, which was great. So I had to do a conversion course. So I did a year, what they call CPE. It's all a bit different now, but that's the Common Professional Examination. So that was a 3-year law degree in 1 year, very intensive course. And then actually during that time, I had decided I was going to be a barrister rather than a solicitor. But financial things meant that I decided to go and get a training contract. It's quite difficult to earn money quickly being a barrister, and I didn't have a huge amount of finance behind me. So I decided that I would be a solicitor, and I managed to get a training contract during my second year of law school. So that really helped out. And then I started working. I started training in 1995. So, and then 13 years in law. So
before we go into that, was your decision to do economics and then law, which are quite traditional sort of subjects to do, was that influenced by your upbringing, by your family, or was it something that you were driving that
very much something I was driving. Actually, my parents are archaeologists, so they couldn't be more different. But I suppose I'd always grown up in a academic background because they're both professors. So that it was that sort of work hard, use your brain, and do what you can to really follow what you want to do. So I suppose they were always really encouraging of, if you want to make something happen, you can do it. But it wasn't the sort of thing where I had to really think about how I was going to finance all of this. And so no, it was very much my doing. But no, I haven't followed an economist or followed a lawyer into the job. And then, of course, I ended up doing things that were completely different, but we'll get on to that later. But,
yeah. So you spent 13 years in the city as a lawyer. So What was that experience like? Was it exciting? Was it like, because it obviously you were you doing corporate law at that stage?
Okay, so when you're training, you train in various different areas. So you do corporate, you do some company commercial, you do conveyancing, which is property law and litigation. So you do a whole load of different stuff. But I specialised, as soon as I had qualified, I specialised in branding, intellectual property and advertising law. So I very much went into that sort of that area whereby people with ideas and concepts, how do they protect them? How do they then take them forward? So it was the sort of within the auspices of company commercial. So a number of brands that are out there today, I remember being involved in the early days of protecting their ideas, protecting their names. You've got the trademarks, you've got patents, all that sort of thing. And then how do they build their company with their shareholders and you know, the responsibilities and shareholdings and partnership, all these sorts of things. So actually, from quite early on in my legal career, I was involved with people who had a kind of entrepreneurial mind. Because if someone's got an idea and it needs protecting, that idea has come from an individual. Yeah. And so lots and lots of interaction with companies who were being quite innovative. So some of the early online streaming channels like Napster and people like that, as well as actual brands that are on the high street today and that sort of thing. So no, I really enjoyed it, and it was really hard work. Definitely isn't one for sort of, you know, sitting on your laurels. So it was hard work, but I met really good and fun people who are still friends today. And I think a lot about working is it also does have to be fun. And I very much instill that now when I do my consultancy, because, you know, I think you won't have longevity with something if you don't also find it enjoyable.
Absolutely.
It will just be a constant slog. So no, I did really enjoy it. But ultimately, I had an idea and I wanted to take that forward. But I would say that the foundation of that legal training, that knowledge, it's something that's always with you. And sometimes I think I don't even realise that I'm using it, that knowledge and information. I think certainly going forward and in my negotiations that I needed to do for my own business, it was absolutely key that I had done these things before and had that confidence, I think, to be able to go forward and ensure that, you know, I got the deal that I felt I needed to get. So very useful. Yeah.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Hi, I'm Alex, the host of X Health Show. Meet the future of healthcare. Think X-Men, that's X Health. Actual superheroes behind programming living cells to cure cancer once and for all. Tech that detects preterm delivery in seconds, brain-computer interface, or apps that employ AI to match you, your disease, with the best treatment. X Health Show brings to you visionaries who push the boundaries of healthcare from Switzerland, the heart of Europe and the most innovative country in the world. Let me introduce you to their startups. Head to X Health Show, meet the future of healthcare. Happy to greet you there.
Yeah, I worked in the Big Four, PwC and KPMG, for 15 years, and I've now struck out and do my own thing. But I think for me, it was a really good grounding, spending sort of 15 years in a very professional environment. And I can tell by looking at how you're speaking, you come across as very professional, very, very competent. I think that there's similar traits in being a lawyer. It gives you such a good grounding of how to conduct business that people will come to you and people will respond to you because of.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it, and I'm sure it's exactly the same with you, having been in the Big Four, is that there's also that sense of credibility. You know, when you're going out and you're on your own and you're forging your way in a completely new area of business and life, and if you have no background and no experience in it, really the selling point is yourself, of course, your idea, But you can have the best idea in the world. But I often say to people, if you walk in somewhere like a dog's breakfast, you're never going to get anywhere in the first place. So it's about you as a person, as well as the concepts and ideas that you want to take forward. Because, as I say, early on, particularly when you don't have a whole range of products that you've done in the past or a range of services that you've set up, and it is about you, and it's about people being able to believe in you and that you'll be able to make it happen. So I do think that comes a lot from the backgrounds that we've been talking about.
I think business is based on people. Like, you can have a great idea, but if you are not credible, then people won't invest in you. So I think
exactly, because that's and I often think I was doing an interview the other day, and it was about the challenges of lockdown, and it was about the challenges that we are going to be facing in the next 12 months, 18 months, God forbid, longer than that. But about, how much harder it's going to be to raise money and to do the things that ultimately entrepreneurs need to be able to do to move things forward. And we really were talking about that credibility, that tenacity that you have to have. And it's so down to the individual and the rapport that you can build. And even more than ever, we have to really recognise that, but also bringing in those other soft skills like empathy and really being able to understand and put yourself in the shoes of the people that you're trying to engage. Because, I often say, well, imagine what would you want to hear if it was you being asked to take on the product in a new store or stock it online or asking for money to take a business forward. What would you want to know about that person or about the product or whatever? And really try and think about those things and engage those skills of rapport and empathy and everything. And a lot of people have had a really tough time in the last year. So I just think we all need to be really aware of that. But there are opportunities there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right. I think empathy is such a crucial skill in business, which is sometimes underrated because people just think that you want the profit margins, but actually, as I said, there's people in business, and if they're clients, customers, or even employees, they're all people you need to connect with and build rapport with, and establish relationships with people, because that's what business is.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, so then you were the founder and CEO of Content and Calm. Now, were you? Did you have that as a side hustle for a while you were still as a lawyer, or was there a definite shift? You said one day, actually, I want to do my own thing. I'm going to move over to my own business.
Well, that's an interesting one, Mark, because there was certainly a moment when I made what I call a change. But before that, while I was working, in fact, when I had the first of my two children, there was something I needed and I assumed I could buy it. I never for a moment thought I wouldn't be able to buy it. And I remember, this is sort of early stages of, Googling things. And I remember we were going to go away for the first trip with our daughter, and she was going to be sharing a room with us. And we had got her into quite a good routine where, she would go to bed with darkness, with the blinds shut and what have you. And I was thinking about lunchtime sleeps, and I was thinking about maybe we might want to go down for dinner. We were just going to France. And we might need a babysitter in the room, but we can't expect the babysitter to sit in the dark while she, So I thought, oh, no problem at all. I'll just buy myself. And in my mind, there was a name for it, which ended up being the name I used for my first product. And it's just literally explanatory. I needed a cot canopy. I needed a canopy that could go over a cot and give personal darkness. That's all I needed.
Right.
And there was no such thing. And I thought, well, there must be something like it. And I ended up going completely off piste and thinking, well, there must be something I can use in exchange. And I ended up finding a sort of mobile darkroom that a photographer would use. And I thought, I've really lost the plot here. I'm not going to be putting that over my baby's cot. So we didn't end up having the cot canopy that we needed. We went on the holiday. But I kept thinking to myself, that this was something that would be really useful. And a lot of my friends were having children at the same time. And I asked them, what do you think? Do you think such a thing would be a useful idea? Yeah, I think that they thought that was a great idea. That would be, a good thing to have. However, sort of one of the first things I say to people when they have an idea is you really need to evaluate, because you might think it's brilliant. And then other people give you that funny side look like, yeah, I'm not so sure. But people seem to like the idea. But we didn't have the product. I went back to work. I had my son. And then we were going away. And we were, again, it was to do with travel. And I've always loved travel and wanted the kids wanted to be able to move around with them. And we were going to a place in Cornwall and they were going to share a room. Now, by this point, my daughter needed the light to get to the loo because she was getting out of the bed. But my son was in the cot and was literally one of those sort of Duracell bunnies that the light comes on and he is ready to go. It could be 2 a.m. I'm ready to go, jumping up and down on the cot. And he learned how to launch himself out as well, and would sort of appear, in our room. Anyway, so I really needed it again at that point, and I thought there must be something there. So this is the point where I did some evaluation. So I was still working, but we really had got to sort of 2 months before I ended up doing what I call sort of making that stock change that you need to do to make something happen. Because once I had done the evaluation, and that involved speaking to people who actually would be those decision makers. So people like midwives who would have a view on whether keeping that continuity and darkness, which would give parents confidence and things like that. Also nurseries where they might have lots of children in a room, and parents and some early sort of thoughts with people I knew in retail, is this something? And I got to the point where I thought, do you know what, there's enough here. And I think I always had the desire to do something different. So I enjoyed law, I enjoyed what I was doing, but I was now very much along the path of this is something that I think I can do and something I can take to market, which was quite interesting. Bear in mind, I'd never designed a product before in my life. I had absolutely no idea about manufacturing or actually retail in apart from the sense that I had worked with brands and I'd done the sort of legal side. I was very much the consumer like anyone else. I'd go to a shop, find a product on the shelf, look at that. Do I want it? Don't I want it? Put it in your basket. That journey that I then learned, any single thing that you find on the shelf, how it ended up there, it's so much more protracted than I ever could have thought. So I've certainly learned that.
So your canopy and your bag that you did as your next product.
Yeah.
In manufacturing, so where did you get the contacts to...
Right. Well, that's sort of the next stage. So I say there's the idea, there's evaluation, there's making the change, because ultimately, depending on what you're trying to do, for me, I wanted to try and make this something that would be a brand, as in there would be more products.
Right.
There's no way I could carry on working in law and create something like that. It was all consuming.
Yeah.
Because before even going and doing the manufacturing, I had to think about protecting it. Because at that time, there was, as I said, I couldn't find a product on the market, so I knew it was new. And I couldn't find anything globally either. So it was a whole new concept for which there had to be the whole testing manual for this type of product had to be written. And I had to get involved in that with a global testing house. So there was a lot kind of behind it that had to happen first. But originally I approached UK manufacturers. Literally, I had no contacts in that area whatsoever. So that's when kind of a bucket load of tenacity starts getting poured in. And I just thought, anybody, I thought, who might know somebody, I asked. And people were incredibly helpful. So I asked a lot of different people for any contacts they might have. I had a couple of amazing people who helped me along the way. But initially trying to get the manufacturing done in the UK, to make a long story short, it would never have been able to have been done at the right cost. There wasn't a lot, that the manufacturing of fabrics, the tooling, everything, the product would have been too expensive to make it viable. So I went to China. I knew that I had to do that.
Right.
And did I have any contacts there at the time? No, I didn't. But I literally Googled different companies that were making things out in the Far East. Right. Had a number of conversations with them, and I went to Hong Kong, which is where quite a lot of the manufacturers that manufacture on mainland China will have their offices. And I sat there with my idea. And it was actually quite funny because the thing is, Mark, I realised that was one of the first times where I realised that actually I had gone down a rabbit hole before I got there and wasted money that I didn't need to spend. And that was because in my office, when I was still in law, do you remember the first holiday where we were going to France? I sketched what I wanted on a piece of paper. And my assistant, who I shared a room with, I said to her, look at this. This is the thing I need. And we used to joke about it. She would say, how's it going with your thing? And I'd written copyright on the corner and, with the date and what have you. And I thought, in my mind, I thought I needed to go to professional designers to design it properly in order to be able to take those drawings to a manufacturer. That was what, in my mind, I needed to do.
Right.
And, the designers were very happy to go along with that because I spoke to a number of different designers and it cost me a lot of money. And ultimately, I ended up with just snazzier versions of my rather hopeless sketch. But the rather hopeless sketch was all that they needed.
Really?
Because what was so amazing was that energy and that willingness to really listen there. With the manufacturing, so the head of manufacturing at the factory I ended up going with, he could visualize my concept. He could understand that there would need to be a clamp that would need to go on the cot to attach the canopy. And those bits that were so important hadn't even been done in the drawings that I spent all the money on. Anyway, the long and the short of, and every product I did after that, I sketched and I discussed with them.
That's interesting. It's interesting because manufacturing, I would have thought as the industry, not nowhere near an expert in manufacturing, but I would have thought manufacturing would have been very much, these are the dimensions that I need. These are the size, the shape. These are the extra pieces that I need.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought the manufacturing would have been creative enough to have taken it from your sketch.
What was so amazing is, as I say, the guy that I worked with for many years on my initial products, his name, well, the name he gave is Man King, Manufacturing King, but I mean, that wasn't actually his name. But I think that the point was there was so much willingness to sort of think outside the box and really understand also because he had his manufacturing hat on, he knew what the factories could do. So, they would help a design or an idea come to life. And they would use whichever of their manufacturing, factories would be right. So some of my stuff was, I in the end had 5 different factories making different things. Because sometimes it was more fabric based, some of it was more tooling based. And the idea of tooling, I had no concept of it at all. And I had to learn so quickly. But being out there, my big smart drawings that were in a roll that I brought out sort of got pushed to one side and my original sketch was there and it was all about the conversation. So I think that was a really interesting thing that happened there. And in going forward, there was a lot of joint discussion about sort of what I was trying to achieve, how I wanted to achieve it. And taking it, to that level. So, yeah, it involved going to China. I went to all the factories myself on mainland China. So I would go with Nanking, or if I was using a different factory, somebody else. I would meet the factory owners. I would see where the workers lived, because you've got to remember that when you want to sell to retail, whether it was UK retail or international distributors or international retailers, you have to have done that due diligence to know that the conditions in the factories are right. As a supplier, your supplier agreements with UK retailers, this was no simple thing. It was complicated, and you took on a lot of liability. And actually, so it was really important. So, but that rapport that we talked about early on, and really having a connection, the owners of the factories, they were quite surprised that I pitched up with my guys from Hong Kong, and that I had made the effort to go. I mean, and some of these were really far inland in China, really quite remote.
Yeah.
And it made a difference, and it really made a difference when we were up against it with timelines, because I had actually gone and they had seen me. And I often think that they sort of thought, who's this sort of half Danish, quite, crazy woman with her ideas coming forward. But we had good relationships, and it worked, and it made a difference. And that, having the connections there in terms of the rapport that I made such a difference going forward. So, the first product was the clock canopy. There were various different versions of that. By this point, I had various other products in the line, one being, for example, Protect Your Shade, which was to do with giving shade in a car. But the product I suppose that most people know me for is Tray Kit, which is the product that I know before we started the interview, we talked about having the chat about good old Dragon's Den. But that was the product that I took with me. And it was one of those things where when I first started inventing things, people think of you, they say, what are you doing? Well, you're inventing these products. What are these products? Oh, you should go on Dragon's Den. Because at the time, Dragon's Den, it is still popular, but at the time, it was the second most popular program on television after Top Gear. It was huge viewing numbers, 7 million people every Sunday or Monday, whatever day it was on. And so people constantly said to me, you should go on Dragon's Den. And I said, no way am I going on Dragon's Den. And I sort of said, and that wasn't because I wasn't up for the challenge, because I am up for a challenge. And if there's a good opportunity, I will go and talk about my products and see what I can do. But the problem was at that point, before Tray Kit was an actual thing, it was an idea in my head at the time. The cot canopy I felt it was too controversial and too complicated to explain in 2 minutes, as well as getting numbers across and all that stuff, because ultimately there was some controversiality about it in the sense that you're covering a cot. I mean, obviously we had done all the testing and everything, and it was safe and all those things. But I just felt that when I looked at some back programs of Dragon's Den, and I wasn't an avid watcher actually, but I looked at some back programs and anything that was to do with children or baby products, there seemed to be quite a vibe at the time of the dragons to dislike anything that made things easier, because you should just sort of tough it out. And I remember Duncan Bannatyne, great guy, but I watched an old program of his, and somebody had come up with a product that would record bedtime stories, and you left it in the cot with the baby, and it would kind of read out a bedtime story.
Right.
He absolutely hated it, and he said, "Yeah, I hate your idea, and I hope you fail." And I was like, oh, blimey, that was, this poor guy who'd come up with this talking teddy thing. But the idea, his point was, in my day, parents should be involved and all of that sort of thing. So, I knew there was some controversiality about that first product. Anyway, at the time, I had, there was a lady who was a mum at school, and she was doing a bit of part-time PR for me. And we talked about it. And she said, you know what, I really think you should do it. I really think you should consider it. And I said, well, I can't go with the cot canopy for all the reasons I've just discussed. But I do have an idea in my mind, and this was the Tray Kit idea. And this was, the whole thing happened actually because Dragon's Den contacted me. Their researchers had contacted me initially. I didn't approach them, but that was because with the cot canopy product, I had been lucky enough to win a UK Inventors Award the previous summer. And I think, they look for people who are making things. These aren't obviously the dragons. These are the researchers.
Yeah.
And I said no, and then they followed up. And I guess they were tenacious too, because they followed up. And by that point, I had been beaten into submission by my PR lady. And I said, well, I do have this product. And anyway, they said, right, send in a submission. And it was a really involved process. It was, and the amount of information you had to have, and you couldn't, absolutely, you wouldn't have been able to say you'd had a conversation with a retailer without the, the backup. Mm-hmm. But of course, you're not just going on with one product. If you had one product that you wanted to promote, you had to talk about the whole brand. So I knew that they would, and ultimately that credibility that we talked about would come from me already having sales with my first product. And that had come from doing an initial trade fair where I had begged for contacts at shops like Mothercare and managed to persuade them to come and see me. And they came in a scary manner and sort of rattled at my prototype that was made of paper mache, basically. And luckily it didn't fall apart. And I did get sales from that. So that was a whole kind of different story about having that first trade fair and really being out kind of in the ether. But with Dragon's Den, they said, do a submission. I did a submission. And then I got a call saying, and this was say on a Monday, and I got a call saying, right, for a sort of tester interview or presentation the following Thursday. So, I had no product, it was an idea. And so I kind of had to go and pretend as if I was going to do something. They liked that. I guess the way I talked about it, I did a pitch. Of course, it wasn't my total final pitch. But then what happened was I remember coming out of a meeting with the bank, because at that point I was, was bank financed. I
was going to say, how did you finance?
Yeah, so I'll tell you about that. But I came out of a meeting with HSBC, and I got a phone call, and it was the researcher people from Dragon's Den saying, and this was I think a Tuesday, and a week on the following Thursday or similar, they said, right, you're up against the Dragons, you're selected. And as brilliant as that sounds, I didn't have a product. I didn't have anything to show. And this is where actually that relationship that I had with the factory in China couldn't have been more important, because I got straight on the phone to Man King and said, good Lord, that thing I sketched out for you? Well, I'm going to be on TV with it. I don't know how it's going to go, but we need a prototype. And we endlessly talked on the phone about what to do. He was sending me pictures. I was then amending back and forth. There was no Zoom like we're doing now. Do you know what I mean? It was all over the phone, and I would sketch something and then I would email it to him, and then he would sketch something and email it back. Anyway, the long and the short is the prototype sample turned up the morning I left to be filmed that night.
You couldn't have scripted it, could you?
It was really touch and go, because you stay in a hotel the night before, and so the day I left, it arrived, and it was anyway. So that was very touch and go. But as it happened, you're risking, to go out there and to promote your brand. You've got these 2 minutes, but I knew my numbers. I had done the homework. I put the time. I really, really put the time in to know what I was going to say. And
so at the start, did you create a business plan? I assume you needed it if you were going to do finance through a bank.
Yes. So I'd already done that, because my first the crop canopy was already selling. So I had Mothercare and a few other retailers at that point. So I had. In terms of sort of being professional and kind of knowing what I had, my projections, yes, I had put quite a lot of work in. But in terms of, and actually, the way that it was structured in terms of what you had to produce to even go on the programme, it really made you focus your mind. So it was a good thing, but it was a huge amount of work. And had it gone south, I'm not so sure I'd be saying the same thing now. But it did go well. And it was one of those experiences that you sort of can't make up, because you're in a room with all the people who are going to be filmed that day, and everybody was going one by one, and you don't know. You're waiting your turn, and I was the last person. I was the last person there, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, one. And it was you get there at about 7 a.m. from the hotel, and they brought me in for filming at about 6:37 in the evening. It was a very long day, just waiting, practicing, waiting.
So you got the deal with Peter Jones and Deborah Meaden. How long was that relationship active? Like, how much involvement did they have in running your business?
On the actual day, I got 4 offers and negotiated to go with those 2, which was quite fun. And Peter Jones said something he said he had never done before. He didn't ask me any questions, and after an hour of me being grilled by the others, he said, I've never done this before. I'm not going to ask you any questions, and I'm going to offer you all the money.
I saw.
So that was quite cool.
Amazing.
So yeah, they were great, and because it was a joint thing, I actually sort of had more involvement with Deborah, actually. And although, Peter was sort of in the background. I think it depends on how much you had already done. I'd actually already done quite a lot with what I was doing. And in terms of, particularly that summer, so I did the filming, but obviously you can't tell anyone what's happened, but I'm meeting with them in the background, Deborah and Peter. And I'm also, and this is the reality of it, I know it's gone well. I don't know whether it's the best of that series or anything like that, but what I was very aware of was that I needed some product. So you remember I'd gone in with that one prototype.
Yeah.
But if they were to show the program in, say, week 3, which might have been at the end of July, and I was filmed in May, and I didn't have any product, that's completely wasted opportunity.
Yeah.
So the first thing I actually did was go to China. So as soon as I'd done the filming, I went to China, and we basically worked on the product until it was good enough to be gold sealed, where you go through all the testing and all of this sort of stuff. Gold sealing, we did have to air freight some, and we just didn't know when the program would show. So, we had to be ready. So, there was obviously involvement at that point. But I did have some investors before I went on the program. And that was sort of very enthusiastic family and friends who wanted to get involved. And I also had bank finance. So, I had gone for bank finance before I knew I was going to do Dragon's Den, because, obviously I didn't know that I was going to do that. And I'd say HSBC were very helpful. They were very good in the sense that they, you think you need a sum of money, you go in there, you justify why you need that money. But actually, we created a sort of setup whereby part of it was export finance. So that's very useful because effectively they would pay for your manufacturing. You then had a certain amount of time to pay while it was being manufactured and shipped into the UK and sold, hopefully. Hopefully sold to somebody else. So those were the sort of big challenges, doing all of that. And then, and actually, kind of when the program did eventually air, it turned out that I was the last program of the whole series.
Right.
And it was a bit of a sort of, wow kind of thing, which I was so pleased about. And I remember sitting with some of my investors and my lawyers when the program was aired. We just didn't know what was going to happen. And I remember being interviewed on BBC 5 Live that night, and all sorts of things happened afterwards, all sorts of things. And, there was a huge amount of demand, and retailers that I wasn't already with wanted to be involved. So, that was all super exciting. But I'm going to be honest, there were lots of challenges with that too, because as much as, as a supplier, and things have changed a bit now, because actually suppliers had a bit of a raw deal in terms of your contracts with certain retailers, not all, but some. You had to commit to being able to sell a lot of product without getting paid for sort of 90 days at least. This is a huge amount of risk going on here, and minimum order quantities in the Far East. So this is all a learning curve. So I'm just learning all the time, quick, thinking, right, okay, what are the right decisions to make? What more can I take on? How many, are we still, at the background of all of this, there are other product lines coming up, different colorways, different additions to all these products, and things like that. So there are a lot of challenges there. And this is all sort of 2011, around then, there were a lot of challenges in the high street. So I wasn't just selling to bricks and mortar retail, I was selling online as well on my own website, but also I'd started international trade by this point. So I had been to a very big trade show called Kinton Jugend in Germany, and I did that 3 or 4 times, and had picked up some really good international distributors and things like that. So, all of this is going on. And you've got responsibilities to your investors. You've obviously got your banking people. You've got your employees. And really, sort of, it felt quite quickly that what I started it to do was come up with ideas and make things and do things that would be useful and make traveling with children easier. That was the whole point, to make traveling with children easier. You end up, you've got so many different entities involved that you're spending less time doing the designing and more time being in HR.
Well, when you scale a business, you have to build in processes and systems, don't you, to be successful. So it's not that's how you actually get to the larger scale and being able to deal with bigger business.
And I always say, never ever be afraid to employ somebody who is better than you, knows more than you, because as much as you think you might be good in one area, you probably don't know enough in another area. And so, bringing in the right people, but also recognizing where your own skills are, because ultimately, my skill was, yes, partly designing it, but, there were lots of other good people around who would make things better, help to tweak things. But very much on the sales side. I was a good salesperson for my own products, and I did a lot of partnerships, which was such a interesting thing to do because ultimately I was a small brand and a sort of new thing, a new brand. What are these products? But I managed to get them into most sort of UK retailers, and they were selling around the world and things like that. But actually. When you're bringing in a new brand, it's great to team up with somebody else who is in that space, has similar customers of the sort that you think, and can really help your profile. So I had a couple of really nice tie-ups with British Airways, which was just fantastic. They were so willing to listen to new ideas, and we did some fab photo shoots with them with new planes before they'd even flown. And my kids, I always rolled my kids out as models holding the products and things like that. So those sort of things. I did some things with charity. I'm now on the development board of an ovarian cancer charity, and I had got involved with them and we did commercial participation agreements with them. So, bringing in other parties and third parties that actually can help. It's not only about leveraging your own brand, but just has the right fit.
Yeah.
So when I work with other people now, I talk about partnerships. I talk about that sort of, the side with charities, the philanthropic side of things. What are you doing in terms of, because of course you can have the best idea in the world, and we talked about this before we started, but also if people don't know about it and you haven't done the right thing in terms of your marketing and your PR, you're not going to get anywhere. People have to know what the product is. They have to see it. They've got to be able to feel it. And that isn't always about pitfall number 2, about spending a huge amount of money with big expensive PR companies, because you can waste huge amounts of money on sort of advertising that doesn't do anything. It's like, what does engage people? And I think a lot of that is being in those places and where your customers ultimately engage. So the sort of things we sold product via also Virgin Atlantic and things like that. So it's all travel. It's travel related, and it's being in the magazines that people would read on.
Who was your ideal client for your tray? Did you?
British Airways was my ideal client.
No. I mean, as in your ideal client, as the individual. The individual.
So the whole purpose of this product, and I remember when I did my Dragon's Den pitch, I had been that person so your kids, when you travel with kids, they want things to play with, and that can be in the car, it can be on a plane, it can be on a train, and they'll normally have a little backpack and they'll get everything out, right? And that can be little dinosaurs, little characters, puzzle pieces, all this kind of stuff. And they will get it all out and they'll put it on their lap, or they'll put it on a tray table on a plane or in a train, and it all falls off. And some things fall down, and you're driving, and the dinosaur's fallen on the floor, and your child says, I've dropped my dinosaur. And you say, well, we'll just have to wait. And they know my dinosaur. And their children are really tenacious as well. And you end up leaning backwards, trying to pick stuff up. And I had that same thing with being on the plane, where things rolling down the aisle and what have you. And I thought, well, hang on a minute. What about if you had a backpack that they carry for themselves, put everything in and then play within it. And that was the idea.
So your ideal client was you. You were.
So the ideal client was me. I was the person who needed it, but there were lots of people like me.
Yes.
And if you go the days when we used to be able to travel, that's the thing, Mark. But you remember, you would often see, if you saw children that were able to walk, how many would have a little backpack with some stuff in it? Yeah. But the point is they get it all out. And then it doesn't stay within. And this is an extended tray table, and the strap now is take it, pack it, strap it. And so it straps to the airline tray table, or it hangs from the seat in front in a car, and they can play within. So it was a travel parent, but that didn't mean it didn't have to be airline travel.
Yeah.
A parent that's moving from A to B, and wherever that might be, and for the child to take responsibility of choosing what to play with, putting it in their tray kit, playing within it, shutting it at the end of the journey, and off they go. So it was anybody who has children who's going to go from A to B. Yeah. Of which there seem to be quite a lot of people.
Yes, I think there obviously there was, and it's definitely been a success for you. So you started. I'm going to move on. You started inspirational solutions.
Yes.
So how did you sort of think about that? And
so during the time of creating all these products we've just talked about, because it was a story, I suppose, of a real story of somebody taking an idea and taking it from in their head in the shops. It was a real story of somebody who had no experience in one area and managed to do it. So during that time, I was doing a fair amount of public speaking and being asked by other companies, could you come and do a sort of motivational talk at our AGM or whatever it might be, but also, can you look at our products? Could you have a look at what we're doing here? What do you think about expanding into that market? And I absolutely loved and thrived on being able to share my experience with others and hopefully help them to avoid some pitfalls, but also to encourage and keep, to give that motivation to keep going and to have that positivity and that tenacity. So it had all started during the days of the product manufacturing and the retail and the distribution. And I just found that I really did enjoy that very much, and that people seemed to get something out of it. And by this point, I had hadn't seen my children very much for the last 8 years, really hard work. And so I decided to sort of make that into a formal sort of consultancy business where I can either do, I go in and do programs for companies where I'll do a sort of from in your head to in the shops, or inspiring creativity, innovation, encouraging your workforce, just to really let's get these ideas mixing, and helping companies build their brands, as well as helping individuals to be leaders in what they're doing, whether that's motivating people themselves or leadership that they might have because they're in the service sector and doing other things. So it's really about sort of three things. It's about going out and doing the public speaking, which I do. It's about the consultancy, looking at the brands, looking at the businesses, and looking at the people. And thirdly, as I say, really focusing on that inspirational leadership and helping people to take their ideas and concepts and people forward.
How many employees do you have with Inspirational Solutions?
None. Me.
It's just you. I literally
do it.
All the admin as well, all the arranging of things.
They're not employees, but I have people. I outsource things like
VAs and PAs and things.
But no, in terms of actually doing the work, and I might do it in collaboration. So I might think, right, I've got a client that is in this sector, but actually I know someone who's really good in that. I might work on the leadership side of things with the people or the brand or the building an export business, but I know other people in that. So a lot of it's about partnerships. A lot of it's about finding the right solutions for clients where they are really able to tap into that knowledge. And that has come from years of going out to businesses, meeting other people who are sort of in that sector of being entrepreneurial things, and all the people I met along my journey, a lot of the international things, and really sort of bringing heads together and thinking, right, what does somebody need is it, do I have that right expertise, or do I bring in somebody else who's got that expertise? But essentially, it's a consultancy, and I focus on what my clients need, and that's what I do now.
So how do you market for your consultancy?
Oh, lots of different ways. Okay, so quite often I will actually be approached. And that comes from, I suppose it's that credibility thing that we came from having done the hard slog. In the past, I've been a judge I was a judge on the pitch after I did Dragon's Den. So there's been quite a lot of publicity around some of the things that I've done. And also I find things like LinkedIn really useful. I reach out to people who are in similar sectors. People reach out to me. I do quite a lot of interviews, hence talking with you. So sometimes I'm on a panel, or sometimes it's a podcast. And so I would say that it's about connections. Almost everything is about connect. And that doesn't mean to say that I always know the person in advance. I might reach out to somebody, or I'll see somebody talking about something that they're trying to do. I am a mentor for an international organization that mentors females in tech. So I do stuff with that. I do stuff with young enterprise as well. So, it's one of those things where being active, being willing to share my ideas, being vocal and interactive actually brings in people who also have things that they're wanting to achieve. So it really comes from all of that. And the world we're living in at the moment, where we spend half our time on Zoom. Yeah. I mean, normally I'm a real face-to-face person. I absolutely love seeing somebody face-to-face, having a coffee, meeting new people that I haven't done anything with before. And, particularly when I do public speaking and things like that, I often meet so many people through that. But now we do so much online. And actually, the more that means you need to, I think, reach out more. I think you need to be more interactive. I'm sure you find the same with your podcast. Yeah. And the more we do, the more we share our ideas, and the more ideas we share, actually, I think the more sort of gratifying the whole experience is to be able to help more people and to really be able to move things forward. And I think we're going to have to carry on in that vein, actually, for quite a long time.
Yeah, I agree. Even with the vaccine in the UK.
I know. Yes. Well, let's hope that as many people as possible get vaccinated, and that actually people feel confident. One of the things that concerns me is people's confidence, actually, moving forward, confidence to have their kids in school, confidence to be entrepreneurial, if that's what if we're focusing on that, and also people's just general well-being. And I think, again, that empathy thing that we talked about, talking about really listening, not hearing people, listening. It's a completely different thing. And I think we just need to tap into that more and more, and be passionate about what we do, help people be motivated, encourage people to be tenacious. And there will be opportunities out there, and they're going to be a bit different from some of the opportunities that have been there before, but it'll just take that bit longer.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I can tell you are passionate about your businesses. They're 100%. So your clients for your consultancy, are they entrepreneurs that want to scale up? Are they sort of larger brands that we would have heard of? Or is it a mixture?
It is a mixture. So on the larger side of things, for example, I did some work for GE Global, where I was looking at their next cohort of global senior management, and I had them doing a sort of Dragon's Den type thing, and really talking to them about motivation and leadership and idea generation. So I've worked with a number of law firms as well in that vein about retention of staff. How do you do that? How do you be a good leader? How do you encourage your employees to be courageous and share ideas and all of that sort of? So that's almost so those are examples of larger clients, but also in terms of mentoring and people with concepts and ideas. I've done a lot of work with budding entrepreneurs who are wondering what the first step to take should be, and what's going to happen, how to raise the money, what to actually also sometimes how to stay motivated, what they should do to take it forward, and sort of everything in between. So medium-sized enterprises, and that could be looking at their brand range. It could be looking, as I say, at things like exporting, whether that's a good idea, expansion, sometimes contracting a range. But then so often you'll go in with one thing and you'll end up talking about other things as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, we're all at the end of the day people, individuals, and so often it will come down to looking at that sort of motivation and things like that as well. So it's all an in between, right from an idea and to someone doing what I did, an idea from in your head to in the shops, to a huge global company looking at who their next leaders are going to be. So
awesome.
all and everything in between.
So what does the future hold for you?
Oh, more of that, I hope. I hope to continue to expand my contacts and to ensure that I'm doing more of that sort of thing. I have recently started doing more and engaging more in young enterprise. I've been a mentor before for all sorts of people who've been wanting to take ideas forward, and I, for example, had students working for me and all that sort of thing. But I really think in the next 12 to 18 months, those young adults who are coming out of school, who are hoping to go to university, who are going to be looking for jobs, I think we mustn't forget that their entrepreneurial skill is absolutely something that we need to tap into. So just ensure that I share my knowledge, not only with those who are already doing things, but with those who might do the thing of the future.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, we're coming to the end of the interview. I asked the same 6 questions to all of my guests. They are quickfire questions. They don't need a quickfire answer. It depends on what you want to share with me. So the first one is, what's the best decision that you made?
Okay, that's an issue. The best decision. The best decision was probably actually to have the courage to leave my legal job. That was a big deal. It was a good job and I enjoyed it and I worked with nice people, but I don't think I ever could have achieved what I achieved and tried to work in a career like that at the same time. But it was the best background. So,
right. What's the best advice you've been given?
Oh, employ people who know more than you.
Awesome. Who's the person that's helped you most in your career? You can give a few shout outs if you want.
I think, my husband actually has been very helpful. I think he's been, he's been very, very patient with all of this. So he's been absolutely amazing. Who else was, in terms of my career going forward, in terms of the stuff I do now, a lovely, lovely lady called Linda helped me hugely when I started going out and doing my manufacturing. She had a background in manufacturing children's products. So she was absolutely amazing. I'd say Man King was pretty useful. He really
sounds like he saved your business when it was getting everything ready.
How to take an idea. So I suppose the 3 of them were really instrumental.
Do you have any regrets?
Do I have any regrets? I sometimes regret the fact that I probably wasn't at home enough for a lot of years. Actually, I slightly regret that. And when I say regret, I think it's more just a sort of pensive yearning. They've grown up so quickly. Everyone always says to you, they grow so quickly and it'll be in a heartbeat. But now I look back, and I think, 8 years of not really being at home much. So I think a better balance might have been a good thing. And actually going forward, for quite a lot of the people that I talk to who are in the early stages, I don't think it's a bad thing to have a business partner, actually.
Okay.
I think it's quite lonely being a sole, owner, entrepreneur, founder is it's very hard, because ultimately, as good as your employees are, and they can be absolutely amazing, and you can motivate them and bring them along, that the buck stops with you, and it's a huge burden sometimes.
And that's why sometimes, so I talk a lot about having coaches and mentors for yourself, because that's a safe zone that you have outside of your employees or the people that are involved in your project. And so that's why I talk very heavily that people should think about having coaches and mentors in their lives.
And I think that's maybe one of the reasons why I get so much out of doing that, because it would have been fantastic to have had a similar, and I'm not saying people weren't, of course they were, people were encouraging and what have you, but I think it's a quite a lonely journey being a founder entrepreneur. So that have a business partner, it's quite a good idea if you can find the right one.
Yes. What are you most proud of?
I'm proud of actually having made real things from scratch that people wanted to buy, and being able to stick it out and actually make it happen. Because I think it took, I'm proud that I was courageous enough to do it.
Awesome. What does legacy mean to you?
Legacy means the things that we've talked about during this podcast, and the areas where I might have been, where it could have been easier, maybe having a business partner, helping people avoid the pitfalls. I think legacy is helping people to have a journey themselves, hopefully without as much trouble and strife as I found along the way, not having enough knowledge, but also hoping that people, when I leave the room, they feel enthusiastic, motivated, energized and courageous, and that lasts with them for them to move forward.
Brilliant. And lastly, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
They can find me at Inspirational Solutions. So that's inspirationalsolutionsltd.com. And they can always find me on LinkedIn as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. I think you for me are hugely passionate, hugely courageous, making some of those decisions that you did to do it, and tenacious. You wouldn't let it go. So thank you so much for your time today. It's been absolutely fascinating speaking to you.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks.